Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. How are you today? Happy Friday. Excited to be here with all of you. It's exciting.
Thank you for having us, Jamie.
Yeah.
Well,
Thank
thanks
you.
for being here. We're super excited to host everyone. So let's get started. I'm Jamie Seward, Associate Director of Affinity Engagement Programs with the Office of Alumni Relations at Johns Hopkins University. Before we proceed, I'd like to acknowledge our co-sponsors, the Women of Hopkins Affinity, the Life Design Lab at Johns Hopkins, and the Penn Club Women in Business. Now, here to say a few words on behalf of the Penn Club Women in Business is Dorothy Nicholson. Dorothy?
Thank you, Jamie. Welcome, everyone, to our Penn Club Women in Business Society members and guests, and a very warm welcome to alumni of Johns Hopkins University. Thank you all for zooming in. I'm Dorothy Nicholson, chair of the Penn Club Women in Business Group, and this is one of the old societies at the Penn Club. This is our 5th meeting with the Johns Hopkins women, and it's very, very special. I'm excited to say we have a great program today on women and work, COVID's impact, and the return to office. So I'm sure you're going to learn many things. We've gotten several questions, and we hope that there will be some other questions because we want this to be a participatory event where you can get answers to some of your concerns with returning to work. I want to thank Jamie Seward of Johns Hopkins and our Penn Club committee members who helped put it together, Aura Weisberg, Dr. Marilyn Carroll, and Celine Green. Thank you very much. And now I will give the floor back to Jamie.
All right, I'm just bringing in Monica. We're excited to have her also. So Monica, I'm bringing you into. I'm hearing some background noise. Dorothy, would you please go on mute since you're not talking? Thank you, that really helps. So now I have the pleasure of introducing our moderator, Tessa McKenzie. Tessa is the Assistant Director and Life Design Educator at our Johns Hopkins University's Krieger School of Arts and Sciences. She's a certified Design Your Life coach and a career coach. She's been certified by the National Association of Colleges and Employees. She also has her own private practice, Envisage Vocation Creation, and is the president-elect of the Maryland Career Development Association. Prior to coaching, Tessa was a public education officer at the Catholic Immigration Network Incorporated and served in many ways, including as an AmeriCorps volunteer in the area of outreach and immigration advocacy. So she is extremely qualified to be moderating this discussion, and we are very lucky to have her. So with that, I will turn the program over to you. Thanks, Tessa.
Thank you so much, Jamie. Well, if you take nothing else away, I'm really fortunate to be a part of an organization, Johns Hopkins University, that is really prioritizing helping our students, helping our community see and seek out their life's purpose using the principles of design thinking. And I can't think of a more wonderful group of people than to be here with today than the folks on this panel. So I would love to give everybody a few minutes here to introduce themselves. Monica, could we start with you?
Sure. Great to be here. Thank you for having me and having this space. And so glad you're all here look forward to learning from all of you. My name is Monica Kang. I'm the founder and CEO of Innovators Box, author of Rethink Creativity. In short, I love about how do we design a workplace that is for all, for people, creativity. And so I would love geeking out about it. And of course, this remote time has been raising a lot of questions of what does it mean to really work, thrive, and be our full selves. And so looking forward to diving into these questions and conversations today. And Hopkins alumni, of course.
Thank you so much. How about you, Jane?
Hi, it's really a pleasure to be here. I'm part of the Penn Columbia women's group, and it really is such a wonderful question that we're going to be discussing today. I'm affiliated with currently the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, where I've been a trainer, coach, and combine that work with my boots on the ground as a retired school superintendent and an assistant professor at Columbia in organizational leadership. I have my own company, Jane Sandbank Group, where we reach out to leadership, community-based organizations, nonprofits, and of late, much more corporate work, especially dealing with partially what we're dealing with today, issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I'm really looking forward to hearing from everyone. I'm impressed by the numbers of people who are participating and the questions that they've asked and the results of the survey. Fascinating. So I look forward to the next hour spending it with you guys. Thanks.
Dara, how about you?
Me? Hi. Hi, I'm Dara Iserson, founder and CEO of Total Rebrand. So I'm also a Hopkins alum, SICE 2009, and Total Rebrand. So we actually pretty much exist to make workplaces healthier and people happier at their jobs. So really, like, what we do is we focus on problem solving and public health. Problem solving, turning job seekers into problem solvers, and public health, given the fact that toxic workplaces kill about 120,000 people a year. So we really want to change that, and we think that we could really solve a lot of problems in the world by doing that. So given COVID, given everything that's happened, I think it's turned the workplace landscape on its head. And I'm so excited to talk to you about it and how you can really advance your career and do it in a really awesome balance. So I'm so excited to be here, be with this amazing panel, impart what I can and learn from all of you. Thank you.
Wonderful. And last but not least, Nettie, thank you for joining us.
It's so good to be here. Thank you, Tessa, and thank you to each of the other panelists. I'm honored to be here conversing with you and for our guests that have joined us. I am the founder of Sapari Solutions, and my company works with CEOs and other founders, executives, to help them reach their most elusive goals. And we do that through tackling their productivity and systems, helping them see what they're trying to create and then take the steps to get there. Always in my career, I've been looking for ways to provide solutions to people who have felt like there aren't solutions out there for them. And in the business world, there are not necessarily a lot of different ways that are projected on how business is done, and yet there are so many ways to do business. And when we explore all of our backgrounds and expertise and things that we bring to the table, we can create solutions that are better for everyone. So part of what I do is create an environment that supports the work and the biggest goals that the people that I work with do. And I think that this conversation around women in the workplace and the impact of COVID is a great opportunity to kind of undo our past paradigms on how work was done and provide something new that's better for everyone.
Awesome. So let's get into it. We were really blessed to meet a few weeks ago, and I think one of the big takeaways that I had from that conversation was that women are burned out right now, more than any other time in the pandemic, really. And that's not just from us conversing. There was a study recently, McKinsey's Women in the Workplace study, that is telling us that at this moment, there are higher levels of stress for women than at any other time amidst the pandemic. 1 in 3 have considered leaving work or downshifting, and it was just 1 in 4 at the very start of the pandemic. 42% of women have reported feeling often or always burnt out, and at this point last year, that was 32%. So, we did our own research. I think Jane mentioned this earlier, that we sent out a survey, and the people joining the call here, we're so grateful for your responses. It sounds like the people that are on the call today, 50% of you are 100% remote right now. About 17% of you are expected to be in person. And then we also heard a lot of concern, a lot of overwhelm over feeling as though you're all trying to juggle your work, your life, being a parent, being a professional, negotiating your work and your worth and your value. And feeling that a lot of you might be even returning to toxic work environments. This is so much, and really excited to get into it with everyone this hour. But where do we start? I feel like one question that came in, I would love to start here, is how do you feel like the added mental load of COVID, of quarantines, of school policies, of everything has affected people in the workplace, especially women? And I'll open it up to whoever wants to go first.
I'll jump in here. So there's been this underlying current, right, that's pervasive through the entire pandemic. And I would say early on, I can understand the numbers the way they are right now, with more stress than we've seen, more desire to leave their current work environment. Because in the beginning, we were all sort of dealing with the crisis at hand, and we put our energy into solving the problems in front of us, making sure that our children, were getting their education, making sure that we were still able to work and we could manage our homes. And then, and you can deal with that kind of immediate kind of stress for a short time, but then the ongoing nature of the pandemic, we haven't really adjusted necessarily to this new way of living. And the idea that, I don't know about you, but I was latching onto the school year start like it was the biggest gift that I'd received in my entire life. And if they had said that school was not starting and my kids weren't going to be back in the school, I can tell you, I like devastating. It was just going to be another blow that I would have handled, but it would have felt unmanageable because I needed so much to have something return to a normal routine. And for some, that normal routine just really hasn't even come, and even with the adjustments. So I think in what I'm seeing is we're all appreciative of the changes that have gotten us back to routines and systems and that we're familiar with, that allow us to work or serve our families really well. And yet we're sad. And I'm using that specifically because I do feel like we're grieving a future that we didn't imagine, or an interaction that's different than we hoped it would be, not being able to necessarily still see family and friends or go back into the workplace if that's the desire. So while, and probably even some guilt around feeling sad that like we're not appreciating the small gains that we have made so far. So there's just this big burden. Women in the past and still hold the largest share of doing the housework and the child rearing and managing that emotional load. And it's continuing. So I feel like there needs to be places where we can have conversations like this on this panel and talk about you're not alone in feeling that way. You're not alone in your grief. You're not alone in feeling guilty about feeling bad. And it's still okay. The pandemic is not over. It's still okay to need support, to seek support, to reach out to friends and family, to take the space, to move more slowly, and to make some adjustments to how you're doing things.
I'd like to jump in and piggyback on some of the comments that Nettie's made and on some of the questions. And for everyone in every environment, COVID has really produced enormous change, enormous increase in anxiety, stress, ambivalence, overwhelm, whether you have children, young children, where we're dealing with a lot of fear and a lot of worry. But I also want to talk very specifically about strategies and recommendations that will help you deal with all of this, because it it's really going to be better. I believe that, and that it's already turned. And now with the possibility of booster shots and children getting vaccinated, there's and numbers really coming down in this country, globally. I think there's some glimpse of optimism. And if we stay optimistic, that's really going to help our health and our well-being and lessen our stress. So I'd like to hear from some others and then really chime in with some strategies based on social emotional intelligence, and how those strategies can help normalize a situation where you feel you've lost a lot of control and are overwhelmed.
I would like to say something. Thanks. Like, I totally agree with you, Jane. I totally agree with you. I just think that this whole pandemic has just been, I think it's not just the pandemic itself. I think it's the fact that it's just, I feel like the goalposts are constantly moving and there's very little consistency. And I know that a lot of us, we like, as you mentioned, control is a big issue and we don't know the future. We don't know what's going to happen. And I think that part of it, and I think that that's very overwhelming and very stressful when you can't plan out, because I know a lot of us are planners. So what I like to do, or what I've done since the beginning of the pandemic, is because I'm super type A and I'm neurotic and everything, is honestly, like, I made a list. What can I control and what can I not control? The stuff that you can't control, just, I know it's easier said than done, but put it aside. The stuff that you can control, focus on doing your best at that. And I think that focusing on what you control, and just keeping a positive attitude, the optimism really is like 85% of the success. That and just focusing on what you can control and doing it well, I think will help going forward.
And to build on Dara's point, Dara shared the key piece I often have been coaching and using for myself as well. I think often because of everything that we've already spoken about and covered, and the stats, Tessa, thank you for sharing that, of just how visible this problem is. On top of that, I find it really helpful to build on, like, what's your happy list? I think at times, even especially this morning, like, I think I had a start of like, okay, these are things I wanted to do. There was something else that I had to address. And so I completely had to switch gears this morning. And I think many of us probably resonate that how many times we have probably had to do this, probably not just every day, but every single day, multiple times. And that's where we do get drained. If you need a psychology term, it's called decision fatigue. It's a genuine situation. This is a reason why we're tired. We're making so many decisions on top of all the decisions you're making. And so that's the reason why, in addition to Dara's point about control versus not control, the other recommendation I really find helpful, even for me, that I go back to all the time, is being very specific and diversifying your happy list. And I'm not talking about trying to project, toxic positivity. That is also very dangerous. So please be mindful of it. Don't feel like you need to cheer yourself up. If you really need to just hold space and like grieve and have that sadness. I think for those who've seen Inside Out, I think we know the lesson learned if we don't let that sadness express. But you want to be at comfort to know what makes you really at ease, what brings you happiness. And the more specific you have it, the easier it is. I'll give you an example. I know I geek out on movies, animes. I have certain books. I have certain treats. I have specific snacks that would just make me smile. I would treat myself to a milk tea, and no matter how bad and stressful that day is, like, just knowing that, okay, you know what, that was a really tough call. Let me just go get my milk tea and just cheer myself up a little bit. Like, it makes it a little bit better. And as cheesy as that may sound, these are all really key aspects. And part of what I'm hopeful, the optimism in me, is that these were all tools we already needed for a long time. The pandemic just made it so much more visible. And so back to your question, Tessa, how has added the mental load of the COVID impact in the woman in the workplace? We're now seeing all the problems or concerns even more visibly. Hope all our non-female colleagues are now recognizing, hey, excuse me, this was a problem for many, many years, centuries. Please hear us out. And we got to redesign. And this is the reason why I think all of the work that you're all doing, both here, but also everyone here in the conversation, you just taking the time to reflect, hey, what can I do differently? Let me just hear out what are other ways. is the power. And so I hope you recognize that even just processing out, finding your happiness, reflecting on what you can control and not, and taking that one decision at a time is part of the power and able to offload that mental load. And if today is not that happy day, that is okay. You start with one milk tea at a time. Okay, maybe too much sugar, but that's my happy place. And so you want to build that again. We're human. It's not going to be cookie cutter. It's not going to be rainbow sunshines, but you have to absolutely start with where you are. And that's where the self-reflection is. And unfortunately, not everyone's going to see the where we can see ourselves. So start seeing yourself for yourself first. Don't wait until other people can see you. Start there and then start realizing, okay, where can I ask for help? Where can I speak up? Male allies here who are here, thank you for joining. Please speak up, support your colleagues, support your partners, support your daughters and sisters and, you know, mothers and parents and all of that, because you never know. They might be smiling in the camera, but you never know what's going out inside. And so that's how we're going to change this, not overnight, and having more conversations like this. So a couple thoughts on that.
Monica, I feel this. I've had so much milk tea over the past year and a half, just to coping strategies.
I need a discount deal on that. I'm getting
Yes. Well, you know, in particular, Nettie and Dara, two things you just said, I think would be a really great segue into this next question that we had received from someone. We were hearing a lot of themes around the idea that a lot of women feel as though they have to prove their competency right now, as though they have to really demonstrate this dedication because maybe their workplace cultures before weren't so accepting of this hybrid life, this virtual work. So we're seeing women on their phones late at night, constantly plugged to work, trying to answer emails at long, late hours. And one person asked, how do I still kind of maintain a positive reputation at work, not worry about damaging my reputation, but also draw boundaries? Wondering if in particular, Dara and Nettie could answer that, but if anybody else wants to jump in, feel free.
Sure, I'd be happy to start. Yeah, so that's a really good question. I know a lot of colleagues that have had the same question because because yes, you do want to show that you're doing your work. I would say, like, for this one, because I know that the more boundaries you create, the more productive you actually are. So that I think is super, super important to realize. But also, the other thing is that, I mean, the thing is that, like, usually for performance, there are standards. There are things that they judge you on, right? So, you know, at the beginning of the year, you're judged on X, Y, and Z. And those are usually quantitative. Sometimes they're qualitative, but a lot of times they're quantitative. So as long as you're doing the stuff that is on paper, that is what you're supposed to do. That is what they're paying you to do. And remember, this is a job. Employers, organizations are created to solve problems, and they hire you to help solve those problems. As long as you're solving those problems and documenting everything you do and showing that, you know, even if you're not writing an email late at night, but you write it at, like, you know, at the end of the day, and you show that you're just as productive, there really shouldn't be an issue, especially when you're showing that you're getting your work done. And the thing is that these days, I think workplaces are a lot more understanding. Everyone knows these days, everyone has kids, you know, like, they have families, things happen during the day. I mean, and you can't, and I don't think the expectation is that you're chained to your desk, but if it is, you may want to question, just given the fact that it's so hard these days to find good workers. I mean, is that really where you want to be? And is there a place that will be better?
And I know, because I know Dara, she'll probably give tips on how you can make sure you market yourself, make sure you share your value. And to build on that, I just want to add a few other dots that I've been having a lot of conversation with my clients, my communities, and other entrepreneurs and leaders, and many here probably would resonate, is building kind of, even that question is, there's a lot of layers. And so my number one thing that I love to do is just breaking things down. I think often we are overwhelmed. We are feeling like we're juggling so much, because we are, but also because we haven't really gotten a chance to, like, just segment it out. And so I would even segment it out. And if it's okay, I kind of adjust slightly on the language, is actually I would reword the language of judge, because often we're doing that more honestly to our own selves, which is part of the reason why it has been uncomfortable in how we show up. And so I would encourage using the word deferring judgment, being kinder, and not only in how we show up and how we feel, but also us seeing how we see ourselves, but also how we see other colleagues. And honestly, I'm curious if some of the leaders here also resonate, but especially from the leadership lens, some of the challenges that many of my clients share is that, Monica, like, I'm honestly a little worried because I want to be able to accommodate. I want to be able to accommodate every single person's different style, but I kind of don't know. Like, I don't have the time. We have to make these business decisions. And like, I understand not everyone can always do the work that's happy. How do you decide on that? How do you then design a workplace for it? And I say, you have to see how it's not either or. It's always yes and. And part of the challenge is previous decision making in most of the work we've done has felt, Tessa, as you shared the question of, how it feels like I can be either this or that because of the way the work has designed. And so as a leader, I encourage really first asking the question, if you feel like, hey, am I feeling that struggle, or am I feeling that my people are? Ask that first question, where maybe business decisions, culture decisions, the way we work, that we feel it's either or. Either you're on camera or you're not engaged. You're either responding immediately or you're not engaged. Like, how many assumptions are we making that is building? And hence your facial expressions, like, oh geez, my colleague didn't do that email correct. Your facial expression is going to give away, and somehow on screen it feels even scarier when somebody else comes. Now, people and all across the other chains, when you see that response, the key is you want to set boundaries, as Dara said earlier. And so really buffering up to say, hey, building your resilience, thinking about, okay, like, how do I not let that conversation, that feedback loop happening in front of my screen to be defining me? And what the second conversation as a result I've often been having during my coaching is, a lot of us honestly have been attaching our values to our work. So-and-so executive, so-and-so leader, so-and-so industry expert. Who are you outside of your job? That should be your number one identity, not because of your job. But that being said, we've been trained to think of that way. And so I encourage parents as well, right? So-and-so's mom, so-and-so's partner. Can you practice to see yourself, which is easier said than done, to keep just telling yourself, I am Dara, I am Jane, I am Tessa, I am Nettie, right? I am Monica first, who happens to do X, Y, Z. Don't let other people wait to see that. Start seeing that for yourselves and reframing that. And then over time, you'll start seeing, okay, even if people give me that pressure, how can I reframe? And so those are a few tips I hope could be helpful, even if society feels like it's coming after you.
I'd like to piggyback on Monica's point about becoming your own best advocate and how you do that. And you mentioned a lot of really great ideas. I pared it down to 3. And number 1 is to really know yourself. Know yourself. And a strategy that really works is if you can visualize, take a couple of minutes, the time out for yourself, close your eyes, visualize for you what would be the best environment, working environment for you, whether it's in an office, whether it's home, whether it's a hybrid. What does it look like? What does it feel like? What's necessary for you to really feel good about yourself and your work environment? That's an ideal. That's something to shoot for. Then compare that to the reality of your work life right now, whether you're going to be hybrid, Zooming, etc. And then pick 1 or 2 things you can do. You mentioned reframing, looking at it from a different perspective. And a lot of people have said in the survey, they really do not want their work life to be as it was. Nobody wants to go back. COVID has created permanent change and a shifting. So we have to shift our behavior and convince our organizations that they need to shift as well. So we do that by picking 2 or 3 of these things that you visualize that would maximize and help you be your best self. How to get there? What do you have to do that's different from what you're currently doing? And experiment with that. So know yourself, believe in yourself, choose yourself, and that's really working with intention. What is your intention at work? What is your intention in your relationships at home, with family, with your colleagues? And then what is your purpose? What is your purpose? If you can clearly define that for yourself, that will enable you to shift gears and work toward those goals. And take care of yourself in the good old-fashioned way. Sleep 7 hours. You need 7 hours. Give this to yourself. Eat well, exercise, take 10 minutes a day to meditate in whatever way. Time for you, because that's when you open up the creativity and your inner self, who you really are. And that will translate your empathy, how you deal with anger. Work on yourself first. And then it's like when you're on an airplane and they say, put the oxygen mask on yourself first, then you can help your children.
I wanted to jump in and kind of go back to some of the things that Dara said. First of all, just looking at boundaries, which has come up, I like to define boundaries as expressing how you desire to interact with the world and communicating that to others. And very often we expect others to understand our boundaries when we've never actually communicated or even perhaps decided what those are for ourselves. We haven't decided how we want to interact with our workplace, with the work that we do, with our families. And so that's an important first step. And then going on to the next step of making sure we communicate that. So one assumption here is that is a 9 to 5 paradigm, right? 9 to 5 is the time that you need to be at work. And I really love what Dara said about, those performance indicators. Your job is to do the work and to complete it to the best of your ability, as they've hired you to do. But COVID has given us this opportunity to decide when and how that happens. And for certain companies, it's really important that that happen on site, in person, at a certain time. For instance, if you are running a front desk and you're receiving people in during business hours and those hours are 9 to 5, then you got to be in that seat from 9 to 5. But many of us have other occupations and research or development or even customer relations that don't require that you're on at a certain time. And so, perhaps one of the things that you take away is to set a new boundary that you work from. I'm going to speak a lot from a parenting perspective because I have 3 kids. And so, and I know others out there are in that bucket. And so, maybe you work from 9 to 3 while the children are at school, and you desire to work in the evening when they're asleep, because that gives you some quiet time to focus. And that way you can be on when they get home. And that's something that you weren't able to do when you were going into the office. And so that might be something that you ask for. And I would ask employers to consider, you hired your employees because you trusted that they could do a really great job. That's why you brought them on, you invested in them and trained them and brought them, into the company culture. Trust that they're also going to make those good decisions for your organization, even while they're working from home, and give them the benefit of the doubt that if they feel like they can get their work done from 9 to 3 plus 2 hours in the evening, that be okay, that they're meeting those metrics. So I would encourage employers to look for, are your employees getting what they need? Are they feeling supported? Do they need a different schedule? If they're performing well, maybe don't just use that marker. Ask, why are they performing well? Is it because they're in the office or not in the office? And just sort of be willing to explore perhaps a different way of doing things. And for employees, as we're talking about this and you're like, wow, I don't want to go back into work, but I also don't want to be sitting in my house because my kids aren't in school yet and they're knocking on the door, or my spouse is there running the laundry next to my office, or whatever might be going on. What is another option? Is there a co-working space? Is there a space where you can get, into an environment without distractions? And again, when all things are possible, if you visualize, like Jane said, what does that look like? What do you want? Maybe it's 2 days a week in the office. Maybe it's that you come in for company meetings and events so that you can interact with people. Because one of the things that we've lost in this whole shift is we had social networks at work that were important. Some of our closest friends were our colleagues at work, and we haven't seen them face to face. We haven't had that water cooler talk. It feels a little weird to, to say, oh, just pop into somebody's email and say, how's your niece or nephew? I'm sure they got married. You don't necessarily want to stalk them on social media. And so we're missing some of that connection that happens in the office. So maybe you do go into the office for meetings, or just hang around to meet some new people. People have been hired in the middle of the pandemic. What's your interaction with them? So companies looking at your work environment doesn't just provide you your paycheck, but it's also providing a really important social network. And how do we recreate that? And what does that look like?
I so appreciate that, Nettie, because in particular, I've been wondering about, representation in the C-suite, that idea that I think it was 800 to 1,000 women left the workforce between August to September of 2020. And for the women that stayed in the work world, that idea of promotions, of growth in the place of work, I think that has largely been compromised. And I think it's so important to mention that is particularly notable for our historically underrepresented communities, especially our women of color. So I love one thing that you've mentioned here was the idea of kind of challenging the policies and cultural norms at these organizations. I'm sure that we have a lot of leaders here. We have a lot of companies that are represented right now on this call. And I'm wondering if other folks here in this chat have any calls to employers, any suggestions for those in leadership roles in terms of keeping women, promoting women, and changing that culture, changing these policies and these procedures so that it truly is more inclusive.
Yeah, let me speak to that, because this is in organizations that I'm working with, and because of the politics of the day, which we are involved in, whether we are political or not, or of whatever kind of politics we have, issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and this includes absolutely women in the workplace, are key. And I believe it's up to us to be able to stand our ground, to appreciate our voices and what we can contribute. And some of us have, I think, because of the nature of the workplace, been reluctant to do that, feeling perhaps our values and what's important to us is not in sync with where we work. But we need to be influencers and we need to be leaders, because that's the only thing that will really enable organizations to shift. So as Dara said, one of the really, for me, shocking was the percentage of results of the survey, the shocking amount of folks who said their workplace, their work environment is toxic. So what does that mean? That you can either leave, because a toxic environment is so damaging to you, to who you are. You can't just put up with it. So of course we can't just leave our jobs, we have to work. So how do you either shift to a different kind of workplace, or how do you become an advocate for your organization to create a better workplace? Is it toxic because of a supervisor? Is it the culture of the organization? What is it? Maybe you have to find some people who feel similarly and become a team, and many voices. If you're not the only one who must feel this way. So maybe you need to tease out who else you can get on your team and act as a team of people to make very specific suggestions and recommendations, because it's like the old Ben and Jerry's model, to do well, to be profitable and productive by doing good. So how do you demonstrate that, model that? By you dealing in a very empathetic, pro-social way with your organization. And if you can impact that and it continues to be toxic, then you really might need to leave and change.
So I would like to piggyback off you, Jane. Like what you said makes a ton of sense. And I will say this, COVID, there has never been a better time for you to speak up. The reason why I'm saying this is because it is really, really, really hard these days for employers to find good employees, that they could trust to grow companies because of a lot of people are unwilling to work, or because like on it, yeah, I mean like a lot of it is because a lot of other people are unwilling to work, and because people's demands have changed. I mean, this is actually a really great time for you to be able to speak up. And as for speaking up, I mean, with that, it's a dance, it's a game like anything else. I mean, really, part of it is about figuring out like what you can control and what you can control, what you can't control, reading the room, just basically trying to understand the personalities of everyone around you. So something that I like to do is I like to go on Crystal Knows, which is on LinkedIn, which is really, really great because you get to learn about people's personalities. You can learn how to speak to them. You can learn about what makes them, basically what they like to do, how exactly to work with them, so you can word things in a certain way. And so you can position yourself. So I would say find a way to play the game so that it works for you, so that it works in a way that you will succeed. And remember, the job market right now, there has never been a better time to negotiate and advocate for your worth, because lots and lots of places will take you.
And I'll build on that to still say, I understand at times we do feel like we have to quote quote play the game, but I really hope that it's not in the sacrifice of feeling like you can't be who you are. And if it is truly toxic enough that you cannot, please like reach out to, friends, colleagues. Again, I want to plus one and Dara that the timing is good in that I think because of the pandemic difficulty, I know everyone's in a different situation, and taking a month of break of transition is extremely difficult at any point of time. But more people are looking for good people like you. And so if you are at a place right now that you're like, I'm trying to be my authentic self, I'm like tired of needing to show up a certain way, and this workplace is not for me. One, thank you for acknowledging to yourself to say that this is enough, and exploring how you could. And at times speaking up could look like you departing and finding another place. Maybe speaking up might mean sharing about it. And I want to encourage folks to see that speaking up means many different actions. It includes first acknowledging and giving yourself space of healing to see, hey, what does me showing up authentically mean? And in that process, there's probably 3 things that I encourage really doing a lot, is really amplifying the voice of curiosity. So if you see at an event there's a lack of diversity, as an example, I think there was a great comment of like, hey, like even in the panel, like I think that was very intentional. I know sometimes I've been guilty when I go to events like, wait, is that diverse enough? But actually, if you look at the detail beyond just their physical like presence, there is a lot of diversity into the stories, the age, and ableism and all of that. And I've been humbly reminded. And of course, can we do better? Absolutely. I think we're missing some other demographics, honestly, in this panel as well. So thank you for pointing that out. And then other folks as well. But when we see that, what does it mean for us to speak up and share? How can we get curious? If you know that agency, could you share maybe perhaps and say, hey, like, I noticed that you're looking to really celebrate. Can I help you? And you might be surprised. They might be like, yes, and we're actually struggling. Can you just like come and actually take this role? Not that it's going to be like that easy, but I'm just sharing as an example. Unless we reach out with kindness and assumption, we might not know. I'm going to also flip the coin and said, of course, it's not black and white. Many of us are already here in this conversation because we're probably tired of speaking up. So sometimes speaking up might be just like holding the active listening space. It doesn't mean that you have to always go run, and that if you're not speaking up, that you're not being proactive. Active listening, holding the space, and honoring that could really make a difference. And so those are different aspects I encourage framing and seeing, and hence knowing that you're not alone. And as even from this conversations, there's really not black and white, which is why I appreciated everyone sharing about how it has been a stressful time, and we're here to reflect. And I hope that our sharing is a reminder that we're all still figuring out too. There is no one perfect answer. And a reminder that unless we verbalize and talk and process together, then we won't know what we can do differently. And so thank you for sharing your time all here and reflecting together on one thing at least we can do differently.
Yeah, can I just say one thing? Sorry,
Sure.
just to respond to Monica. So what I'm thinking, like, I agree about the whole speaking up, but there's a difference between speaking up and speaking in a language that they understand. Because you can speak up and you could, say what you feel and stuff, but how do you know it's actually being communicated in a certain way? So I think that part of it is trying to figure out the space and then using that space, figure out what people's languages and speak in a language that they understand. Because everyone is different, everyone speaks in a different way. So when I say that, that's one thing, and that's when a place is not, super toxic. But if a place is super toxic, I mean, I know we all have to make money, but it's time to find a new job and find a place that values you.
Absolutely. I wanted to throw out there too, something about my background that I've sometimes shared is that I have a former struggle with brain disease. And so I am part of our neurodiverse community, and something I do a lot of advocacy around. And I've been really fortunate because I get to work with our employers at Johns Hopkins and our students, of course. And I've seen a lot of conversations unfolding around neurodiversity in a really cool way amidst the pandemic. I think a lot rather than, and many students have been, unfortunately, voicing concern over potentially being left behind due to Zoom. Are we closed captioning the talks that we're giving? Are we using clear masks when possible? Are we making sure that things can be understood both in an auditory way and in a way that is written? And I've been very impressed. I've seen a lot of kind of the emergence of neurodiverse working groups. I've had a lot of employers reach out to us in regards to specifically wanting to focus on equity in a way that I did not see before the pandemic. And it does seem to be this cool moment where there is a convergence of incredible need and also incredible desire in industry to attract diverse talent. So I'm so grateful that we're having this conversation and that it is such an uplifting thing. And definitely so appreciative of a lot of the comments we're seeing here. And I also want to open it up to more comments, to more questions. We do have about 13 minutes left. And I'm not seeing anything in the Q&A right now, which is okay, because I know that we have a lot more questions for each other. But feel free to throw them in there and we are happy to answer any. One question that did come through prior to the event is one regarding part-time employment and how you all feel that employers perceive women who choose to go part-time. And this comment broke my heart. I don't know if you all saw this, but this woman wrote, "I'm afraid that my employer might see me as lazy, a failure, maybe great parents, maybe a great employee, maybe not, maybe both, maybe neither." There's a lot to unpack with the idea of going part-time. And I was wondering if you all might be able to embark on that.
I saw that question too, and it really just touched me, especially with all the different ways that it could be perceived. It's not just that she was concerned that she might be seen as lazy, but some people may perceive that as, oh, she's being a great parent and focusing first on her family, which we tend to say we hold in high regard, but our work practices don't exactly support that. And so it's really what got me thinking about and talking earlier about performance. Like I said, we have this, it's not been forever, but recent history, industrial revolution and post, has been that work is from 9 to 5. And so we've moved away from, in that model, we moved away from work is to complete a certain task. But history prior to that, forever, was the work was done when the work was done, right? So if you were going to plow a field, then your work was done when the field was plowed. And I feel like we need to move back to a time when we can reward good work being done well and to our specifications. And that is when we hold the highest regard. And it may be that that work is done very efficiently and you get your project done in a couple hours. There's no need to sit there and stare at your computer or sit, and twiddle your thumbs for any longer than that. So it might be that we have more part-time availability, more part-time employment types of jobs. One of the biggest jobs that I've seen pop up all over is virtual assistant. And virtual assistant can be a huge range of things. I mean, you could have a intense researcher, you could have a PR person, you could have a person who does data entry or data analytics, and it all sort of falls under this umbrella of virtual assistant. I think we're going to see more and more and more of that because it follows this model of a task that's done to completion and done well and then paid for. What we need to then shift is work has provided a social safety net, not just in our interactions, but in the benefits and things that work provides. So since speaking in the United States, because our employers hold the responsibility of providing healthcare and benefits, it is not our government that does that, then that might be something that needs to be reconsidered as we move to more employment that is based on tasks versus showing up for a specific set of time. This has been laid bare in the ride share. Is ride sharing are you an employee? Are you a contractor? Who pays the benefits? What do you do when you're not waiting for a ride? But because we have this model where employment is where we get our social structure and our social benefit, and the government is not where we get that, it's something we may need to reconsider. And how do we make sure that people are supported if they're not working for a corporation?
I want to briefly jump in on that the curiosity lens is the gig economy of how we rethink about jobs and works have already been changing. And, World Economic Forum reported on this before the pandemic as they were reflecting on, hey, how is the work and the way we define work is changing? And as difficult as this is when we're in this situation, and thank you for the person who shared that question and honest reflection of, hey, I'm not comfortable and I'm not really sure if others are perceiving this way. I hope that our conversation today gives you hope and clarity to remember that no, don't let those thoughts or other people who give you that vibe to define you. Absolutely not true. In fact, actually, one of my top talents are many either contractors or work part-time because they just love what they do. And they do that with many clients, many projects, and they're just so good and talented. And they, again, as Nettie said, it's like just because somebody knows how to do it well in few hours less doesn't mean that they should always be the one who ends up doing more work, because then it's unfair. And if it's okay, Tessa, maybe I can build on the wonderful question if you want to build on that. Perfect. Yeah.
Absolutely. Do you want to, I can read it out loud if that works. Do you see an issue while attempting to communicate there exists a defensive posture, perhaps with individuals, supervisor, who may have difficulty dealing well with emotions? What do you advise women in such circumstances to help them? I appreciate you taking a stab at it, Monica.
This goes back to many of the comments that all four of us have probably already brought up, but like boundaries and building where first you the person who shared this question, I want to commend you for having that awareness that like, hey, I'm trying my best. I think it's not resonating with this person. So this is sitting uncomfortable. Number one, us having that clarity is actually really, really helpful for us to then assess what can we do with it. This goes to even what Dara said earlier, like, hey, what can we control and what cannot? We cannot control how other people speak. We cannot control how they perceive or see us, but we can control in how we decide to respond, show up, and not let that define us. And so usually when I have, whether it's, colleagues or clients or anyone who is in that situation, the number one tip I always recommend is what is the boundaries then that you can set? So that way you are still authentically yourself, but set your protective space. So that way you're not letting that comments make you feel hurt or that you cannot. And this goes back to both Nettie, Jane, and Dara's point of then show your work value, let that speak its aspect. And in areas that you want to talk about your emotions, is there somebody else in the office that you can speak with? Is there somebody else outside of work that you can process out? And just because this person or these colleagues are not supporting you does not mean that you cannot have that space. Just find it elsewhere. So I hope that helped. Oh, is that okay? So I hope that helps.
Yeah, I'll say, can I just say something else? And I know this isn't going to sound very touchy-feely, but it is what it is. I mean, sometimes people have different personalities and people react to things differently. And as Monica said, like, you can't control what other people do. And I think oftentimes in the office, we think that the office or our manager is everything. And the truth is, they're just someone that are hired to make sure that we do our work, or that we're getting the results that we are. And I think that that relationship, I mean, I think that there's something that could build with time, but I think having a relationship built basically on those results, and if you establish a good rapport, maybe that support will come in time. I mean, but you can't expect someone to, you know, be able to jive with you emotionally. It takes time. I mean, it takes lots and lots of time and lots of trust. Thank you.
Dara, I want to piggyback on that. You know, we all want to be liked, and everyone can't like us all the time. I mean, that's just a reality. We may rub some people the wrong way, and that's okay. I think in terms of the organization, you need to understand there is a formal and an informal organization in all and every organization. And there's times if someone really is not workable for you, then you could take two approaches. And this is going to sound very touchy-feely. Can you forgive that person for being disrespectful to you? Can you lose your anger and just continue to be who and what you are, and work around the person, or try to shift? Sometimes it's not going to work, and you just need to, again, go back to your data, your productivity, what you've done, what you've accomplished, how you're a really valuable, I would have a conversation. I know I'm not your favorite #1 employee, but if you look at my record, I've done a lot of, increased productivity in this organization. So let's just leave it at that. It's just part of standing your ground, of speaking up for yourself. And then whatever it is, the person may turn around and say thank you and goodbye. But, I also think you have to be willing to take some risk and have confidence in yourself that you can take some risk. I've employed so many young people, and I'm so glad to see all of you. I'm clearly the older guy on the block. I'm 74. I've been through passed through many gin joints in my career. And when I was an administrator and hiring young people, and who would have a conflict about coming to work, the belief that if you want to advance, and I was in my time one of the very few women superintendents. And even as an assistant superintendent or a principal, it's a man's field. It still is. And I would say to the young employees that my generation fought long and hard so that you, a younger generation, could say to your boss, I am not coming to work today because my child is sick and I have to be with my child. And don't lose that. You're entitled to that. And my generation really worked very hard, where I knew I could never be an administrator when I was a teacher if I came in even late and would be, dressed down by my boss, and used a child who was running a high fever or a babysitter who didn't show up. I couldn't say that. I would just apologize. And it has taken a very long time for the gains that have been made. So it's up to you and this next generation to even go further with that, to build on that. and you might have to take some risks. And the risk will eventually lead to positive change in a work environment that's not as toxic as some of you have reported.
Thank you so much, Jane. Thank you for the reminder and the encouragement and the inspiration to continue to work so that all that happens is that this gets better and better.
Thank you. Thank you.
What a note to end it on. I want to turn it over to Jamie at this point because I think we are at time. But thank you all so much for that really enriching and growth-centered conversation.
This was a wonderful conversation. I really enjoyed listening to it. I got a lot out of it, and I hope our attendees did too. You were all so wonderful and so open and so authentic, and that really lent itself well to this conversation. So thank you so much to all of you for your time and your talent. Thank you to our attendees for joining us today. I will share a follow-up email with the recording of this webinar and a list of resources and our event schedule, and we hope you will join us at a future webinar. And in the meantime, stay safe and have a wonderful weekend. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Great